today I want to tell you the very real story about a former priest who converted to Judaism, then proceeded to forge a timeless piece of Jewish art history. And here's the crazy part, he almost got away with it. In 1986, a man named Aaron Berger was given the opportunity to buy the Guadalajara Haggadah. What's unique about this book is it's the first ever printed Haggadah. Now, when we think about printing today, we just press a button on our computer and pages come out of our printer. But when this book was made, printing was a much more intensive process than that. Now, I should take a moment just to explain what the Haggadah is in case you don't know. The Haggadah is a special book that is read on Passover. It contains the story of the Exodus, which is how the Israelites left Egypt, but it also contains prayers and instructions and all sorts of religious songs. And it's read at this special dinner on Passover called a seder. Now, most of the books that were printed in the early days of printing come from Italy. Most famous is the Saen family that would print in the Italian city with that name. But this Haggadah is really special because not only does it predate the Saen family, but it was also printed in Spain just 10 years before the famous expulsion of Jews in 1492. So, okay, imagine this. You're Aaron Berger, you collect Jewish antiques. You're told about the oldest printed Haggadah ever, made in Spain just years before the expulsion, and it's yours for just $60,000. So, of course you're gonna buy it, right? But then something really strange happens. Mr. Berger gets this phone call from another antiques dealer who tells him that he just got this deal on an original first Haggadah ever printed in Spain just years before the expulsion. Now, if you're finding this suspicious, in the art world, when two artifacts surface at the same time, it is a huge red flag. So Mr. Berger reaches out to the FBI Art Crimes Division. So the FBI looks into this, and what they find is another huge red flag. The money that Aaron Berger and the other antiques dealers paid for these Haggadahs wasn't reported to the IRS. In fact, they were spread across several bank accounts to avoid detection. After some investigation, the FBI finds two suspects, and all of the information about the story comes out in court and then in the New York Times, and so that's how we know the story today. Now, I've had to piece this together from a few sources, so this is the story as I understand it. The main defendant in this story is a man named Raphael Pod, who was once a Roman Catholic abbot, which is a high-ranking priest, and then eventually converts to Judaism. But at some point, he worked in the National Library of Israel as a bookbinder, which coincidentally has the largest collection of Jewish artifacts in the world, including a lot of rare Jewish books. Now, this story gets even crazier because during the court case, the representatives from the National Library of Israel accused Pod of stealing rare books from their library while he was working there and giving him experience not only with reading these books, but also reproducing them. And eventually, Pod opens up his own bookshop where he prints and sells rare and limited edition Hebrew books in Long Island in New York State. And so after Pod sets up his shop where he sells probably some legit ancient books and definitely some fakes, he recruits his brother-in-law, a man named Gabriel Reguer, who lived in California, to be the front man to sell these books to antiques dealers like Aaron Berger in our story. Now, Reguer claims that he had no idea that these books were fake, but later he pled guilty to these charges. And so now we can get back to Aaron Berger. He gets off the phone with this other antiques dealer. He's incredibly suspicious about the book he just bought, and so he travels to the National Library of Israel, and they confirm that in fact the book he bought was a forgery. So those same experts travel back with him to New York and testify in his trial against Pod, where they claim that he stole books from the library, but also that his knowledge that he got while working in the library would have allowed him to create expert forgeries and convince all sorts of dealers that they have a good eye, but not the expertise that art expert would have. Okay, so let's get to the end of the story. Pod had to pay $72,000 to Aaron Berger and other antiques dealers that he defrauded, and he also had to pay the FBI some money for the trouble of flying in the experts from Israel and other places and hiring translators. And on top of all that, Pod had to serve a year sentence for his crimes. Now, I found this story absolutely fascinating, and I first heard about it from a lecture by Michelle Margolis on the history of the Haggadahs, where she brings it up, and I'll actually put a link to that lecture down below. But if you're interested in the history of the Haggadah, I want to let you know that I'm actually working on a documentary that will be ready soon. If you're interested in Jewish history, whether it's art or traditions, my name is David, and welcome to this channel where we talk all about that.